Cool, let's dive in. So hello again, everyone. My name is Tori. I am the product lead for the Niantic map. Just to speak for a moment about what the Niantic map is. So the Niantic map is the AR-centric map of the world that we are building and sharing with our developers and our players for AR experiences. So the Niantic map is it's not the largest map in the world. It doesn't have the most data in the world, but it is the biggest and most important and most valuable map that there is for really the metaverse. So thinking about Niantic's mission of inspiring people to explore the world together, the Niantic map is really built from that principle. The app I'm talking about today is called our Wayfarer app. I'm not sure how many of the developers here are familiar with and have played any Niantic games for long enough to be invited to the Wayfarer community, but this name actually has a very long history here at Niantic. There is a very large community of hundreds of thousands of passionate players that have over the years submitted locations that are important to them, and then have also submitted millions and millions of AR scans directly through our games like Pokemon Go and Ingress, for example, that then have built a lot of the foundation that allows us to serve VPS at those locations with the maps that we build from those scans. But the Niantic map and Wayfarer are much larger than just VPS. It's also all the different types of information, whether it's a list of way spots, for example. So these are all the places where people gather. These are locations that are conducive to our mission of shared exploration. We also collect information about whether these are locations that are culturally or historically significant. Is this like a basketball court, or is this a park or a statue, or a location where an important speech happened or something like that. We collect all these different pieces of information and we all put that onto the map. And the map, again, that we are building is really about an AR-centric, human-centric experiencing the world in AR type of map. And we draw the data that builds that map from a whole bunch of different sources. But today I'm going to be talking specifically about the Wayfarer app, how we got to where we are and where we're going next. And I also wanted to thank everyone again for all the questions that were submitted in advance of this session. I'm hoping to address all of those and more in this conversation about where the Wayfarer app is today and what's coming next. So diving in, what is the Wayfarer app? It's really a unified AR mapping app with the goal of allowing discovery of nearby locations, actually enabling AR cartography, which is sort of a new concept of not only adding points of interest and other types of information, but also providing information like scans that allow us to build a much more vivid and deep understanding of these different locations that are conducive to AR gameplay and other AR content. And then finally, sharing. There's really an inherent social aspect to this because most of the data, we have over 17 million way spots today, which are almost entirely nominated by our player community that we've been nourishing for many years. And a lot of these locations are locations that are really important to our players. And now that we have this developer platform, the Lightship platform that you are all part of, it's really empowering developers to immediately jump into that space and not only contribute your own types of data, but also build upon this shared foundation of data that we've collected for many years. So what we're really excited about in general on the Niantic map team is being able to share everything we have and then invite you on board to also contribute and leverage the data that we've already created and collected to build upon this shared mapping platform. For folks here that are familiar with or have participated in OpenStreetMap, it's basically like a map-based Wikipedia where anyone can get involved in the community and contribute their local understanding of points of interest, where streets are, where paths are, and all these different types of information. But specifically for Niantic, we really care about, again, our mission of shared exploration and what types of information do we need about the world to make AR experiences that really fall in line with our mission and what our players and developers are trying to accomplish. So again, the Wayfarer app is really the unified AR mapping app, which today is very much focused on empowering developers to quickly get their VPS applications up and running. But in the future, this is actually going to be something that leverages more and more of our community beyond developers as well. So a whole bunch of different things I want to illuminate and discuss today. But I think one of the biggest questions that I've gotten or that we have gotten at Niantic since we first launched, I think there's a lot of confusion about the difference between a public scan and a private scan. So like, I'm going to dive right into that right now and just sort of disambiguate that a little bit. So you probably noticed in the Wayfarer app, there are two different types of scans that you can do. You can do a public scan, which is typically happening at a wayspot. And then you can do a private scan, which is usually a scan that's done like at a location that's close to your workstation. When we talk about the Niantic map, one of the really important principles that we're adhering to as we build the map is we want to build one map for everybody to share. For that reason, we are really focused and we want to drive AR development to not be like fractured into a lot of little pieces, and we don't want to create a bunch of different walled gardens for each customer. We want to have one shared set of infrastructure. It's also just a practical consideration for us because it is very expensive and time-consuming to build a map. So we want to make sure we build the best possible map and then make that map available to everyone. So that's why, in general, if you are building an application that you want to ship to players and customers, you should be using public scans at public locations. And I realized for a long time, this was challenging for developers because at the very beginning, the map was quite small. So we have added a bunch of features over the past months to make it much easier to, even if you don't have a location nearby that's already part of the map, you can very quickly add it to the map. So I'll be talking about that today. So that doesn't mean that all scans need to be public, however. Like when we launched VPS back in May, we also created this notion of a private location and a private scan. And the whole point of this is to allow folks to have a location that's really close to where you're doing your development, where you can rapidly prototype. We realize it is not practical as a developer if every time you compile a new build, you have to, walk a mile to the closest VPS activated public location in order to test it. So the whole point of a private scan and a private location is to have a location very close to your workstation, even at your workstation, where you can rapidly iterate. So the important thing, though, the limitations here are private locations can only be seen and interacted with by the developer that uploaded the scan. So if you create a private location, that is not something that you can share broadly. It's designed to just be used for rapid prototyping. So you should not, that's not something that you're going to ship. And then another important consideration here is we do not fuse together multiple different private scans. So each private scan is basically just an island in which you can do very rapid prototyping. There's a bunch of advantages that you get when you build experiences at public locations. So if you're developing at a wayspot, so again, a wayspot is it's effectively a Niantic point of interest. These are locations that have been nominated by our players over many years. There's close to 18 million of these today. And these are points of interest that are conducive to our mission of shared exploration. And because they are already part of games that are played in AR, we have tons of data from players that have played at these locations, including millions and millions and millions of scans, from which we build the maps and meshes that are essential for VPS development. So building and interacting on the public map, so at wayspots, is definitely the way that you should be approaching to actually building and deploying your applications at scale, while private scans are specifically for rapid prototyping. So that's just one thing I want to make super clear. And if there's more questions about that, I'm happy to address in the Q&A. So the next thing I want to do is talk about what the key use cases of the Wayfarer app are and what each of these different pieces is most important for in terms of your development journey when you're building with a Niantic app, building on VPS on the Lightship platform. So first, again, sort of returning to creating private VPS locations. So this is actually just a scan I did of my couch yesterday. So for this example, if my desk is actually right next to this couch, if I want to quickly create a demo where I can just like toss a few like basketballs or something around the room and have them persist, then creating a small model of this corner of my apartment is one way I could do that. So what happens here is you complete the scan, you upload the scan, and then usually within a couple hours, we guarantee at most 4 hours, but it's usually a lot faster than that. When you upload this scan, you'll actually be able to go to lightship.dev and go to your account, and you'll be able to see the meshes associated with your private scans. And then those meshes also have associated anchors, and this allows you to quickly do rapid prototyping and actually start publishing content and exploring like what you want to create at a public way spot later on, or at multiple public way spots later on. So that's the private scan flow. Most of the other things I'm going to be talking about are actually somewhat new for the Wayfarer app. These are features we've launched in just the past couple months, and this is all about expanding the Niantic map and actually building and deploying your applications at scale. So once you're ready to move out into the world and publish your content at new locations, the Wayfarer app is actually the easiest way to understand where these new locations are. So you can start deploying the AR content that you are building to these public locations. So what I'm just showing in this video here is, here, let me play it again. I'll pause for just a second. So on this map, this is actually like near my neighborhood in San Francisco. You can see each of these points here that pops up when you click load nearby wayspots. These are Niantic wayspots that have, at the very minimum, they have an image, they have a title, they have a description, and in a lot of cases, these are also locations that are VPS activated. But when you select one, you can see whether or not it is VPS activated. So let me scoot forward a little bit in the video. So I just selected, this is the Monte Cristo bed and breakfast. And you can see this one is VPS activated, which shows up right here. And then you have the location, the address, and you can also see how many approved scans have been uploaded to this location. So we can see here, 28 scans have been uploaded, and this location has been activated on VPS. And then here you can see an image of it as well. So if you travel to this location, you'll actually be able to test VPS there. The next question, and this was actually one of like the biggest pain points that our developers had when we first launched, is what if I want to build a VPS experience at a location and that location is not a way spot? As a developer, there was not an easy way to create a new location and add that location to the map. So for the first several months, there was a process by which you could reach out to us directly and like share a few pieces of information about the location and like take a snapshot of it and send it to us. And we realized this was like way too much back and forth and like not a great experience. So what we've done is we have augmented the Wayfarer app such that developers can directly nominate new locations. And this is actually something I did just yesterday, just to walk through this experience again, so I could show what this looks like. So if you go out and about in your area and you go to a location that is not a way spot that you think should be part of the Niantic map, you can use the Wayfarer app to add that to the map. So I'll actually walk through how that works today. So what I did was I just walked down the street to this location, and you can see the faint marker here is where I'm standing, and the darker marker is where I'm going to say, like, this is where I want to put the way spots. Let me scoot up just a little bit. So I think what I did is I dropped it. Okay, that's where I'm standing. Okay, great. And the first thing I'm going to be asked to do is take a photo of the way spot. So I'll do that. Then we press the take photo button, it pulls up your camera, and I'm taking a photo. This is the San Francisco Fire Department Fire Museum, which is in my neighborhood. This is actually not an existing way spot, so I'm going to take a picture of it and then hit next. And then the next thing it's asking me to do is show the surrounding area. So you take a picture of what the way spot looks like, and then you're also going to be prompted to show what the surrounding area looks like. So it's like, okay, I'll just take a picture. This is the sidewalk, just sort of giving folks that are evaluating this later on, this is what the surrounding area looks like. This shows like, hey, it's publicly accessible. You can walk right up to it. Anyone that's playing a game will be able to access this area and find it easily. That's the purpose of the surrounding area photo. And then the next thing I'm going to do is enter a title. So I'm just going to put in SF, SFPD. I put PD instead of fire department. Oops. So it's the fire museum. And then I'm going to hit done and then hit next and then enter in a short description. So this is a museum about firefighters in San Francisco, something like that. And then I'm going to hit done and then hit next again. And then I'm going to be asked to review the submission. So here I can see where I placed the way spot. I can see the description I put in. I can see the title, the surrounding images, and then I am ready to submit it. You can also enter in some supporting information. So this is something that'll be shared with reviewers, basically justify like, hey, this is why I think this location should be part of the map. So I think I said something like this location has some interesting historical significance. It's good for exploration, something like that. And then once you've done that, you can press a submit button, and then this will be reviewed. So let me see, jump ahead. Okay, let me back up actually. So to share a little context about like how, like what's actually happening behind the scenes when you go through this process. As I mentioned, at Niantic, we have about 17, 18 million way spots that have been nominated by our players over the years. Today, the only way that players can submit new locations is if they reach a very high level in either Pokemon Go or Ingress, which are our two largest games that have AR gameplay that actually allows players to say like, hey, this is an interesting location near me, and I think this should be part of the map. So once a player gets to a certain level, they are invited to join the Wayfarer community, which again is where the name of this app comes from. And that allows them to directly nominate new way spots inside of those games. And then when those new way spots are nominated, they are then passed along to the community to vote on whether those locations are actually good. So there's actually a community moderation piece that happens here. And if you've played like Pokemon Go or Ingress or Pikmin Bloom, any of our Niantic titles, anytime you go to a Pokestop or an Ingress portal or anything like that, that is a location that was nominated by a player and then approved by other players. However, as a player, this process can take a long time because you have to develop a lot of consensus. And we realize that as a developer, you don't have time. I'm sure the developers that are trying to build very quickly don't want to have to wait like days, weeks, months, whatever, for enough people to review the location that you've submitted and make sure that it is safe and appropriate for AR gameplay. So what we have done for developers is we have created a fast lane for you. So if you nominate a new way spot in the Wayfarer app, we are typically going to review that and then add it to the map within like, hours to days. But on top of that, we will actually give instant provisional approval to any way spot that a developer nominates. So in this particular example, I walked to this location in my neighborhood and added this location to the map. And typically you will see it show up and be ready for scanning within 10 to 15 minutes. So it basically pops up right away. So that's what I'm going to show in the next slide. This is just a few minutes later. And now when I hit load way spots, this is the way spot I just nominated. So this is SFPD Fire Museum. And I can already go to this location and scan. You'll see, actually, let me back up just a couple frames. See, when I pull it up, it's already showing up. It already has the details card, and you can see that. Let me pause it. Yeah, so it says 0 out of 10 approved scans. So obviously, since I just created it, there's no scans yet. So now I can use the Wayfarer app to do scans at this location. So I can select the location, I can click scan, and then immediately record my first scan of the location and start uploading these scans to the location. So that's what I'm doing here. I think folks here are probably pretty familiar with how scanning works, so I don't need to go through too much detail there. But I want to talk for just a few minutes about how you actually get from the location to having it scan enough that we can activate it on VPS. So if I jump back just a couple slides to where I went to another way spot, this was the Monte Cristo bed and breakfast, which is actually nearby. You can see this one has enough scans already. This one has 28 out of 10. We recently lowered the number of required scans that a developer needs to complete, or that we need to have at a location before we can activate it on VPS, to make this process a lot more straightforward. So basically, once a location is added to the map, we need to have at least 10 scans that are approved. So when we say approved, when you upload a scan, we do a bunch of checks to make sure that the data integrity is high enough, and that we will actually be able to build a map at that location and a mesh at that location that work well enough for you to build an experience, and then for that experience to be good enough for players to have persistent AR gameplay at that location. So anytime you select a way spot, you'll be able to see, do we have enough of those scans uploaded yet? And in this case, it's already VPS activated. And then you can expand that. And then what this is showing is a histogram of when those scans were uploaded. I don't want to get too far into the weeds because there's a lot of complexity here, but effectively the way VPS works is we want to collect scans that cover a wide range of different conditions. So we care about having different weather conditions, different lighting conditions. We want to have enough imagery of that location that we can capture a wide range of conditions, because obviously that location is going to be visited under a wide range of conditions. So we've lowered the bar a little bit for the minimum necessary number of scans. We lowered that to 10, but within the requirement there for there to be at least 10 scans uploaded to that location, we also enforce that there must be at least a 5-hour difference between the oldest scan at that location and the newest scan at that location. And the reason for that is not to make your lives difficult. It is to enforce that there is a minimum amount of variance, because if you, for example, try to activate a way spot with 10 scans that were all taken at the same time, you're not going to have enough variation in like how that location looks at different times of day, under different weather conditions, with different devices. Effectively, the more variance that we have with the underlying scan data, the better that location is going to work. So the reason that we have this histogram here is to show developers, like, these are the different times that we have the scan data, and the more variation we have in these different scan times, the better the experience is going to be. And in this particular example, we are showing like the midnight to 6 a.m. bucket and like the past 6 p.m. bucket. VPS today still mostly only works during the day, but there's a lot of cases where it might be a location that is well lit at night. So for example, that fire museum is lit up at night well enough that you could probably still have some experiences work there, but as a general guideline, you're probably going to want to mostly be doing your scanning during the day. But again, the whole point of this histogram is just to show, like, hey, these are the scans that we collected. These are the times at which those scans were collected. Okay, so jumping ahead. So once you've submitted enough scans, you can actually activate the location. Once you've submitted enough scans, then we can activate that location on VPS. And then once that has happened, you'll have the option to test VPS at that location. So testing VPS is actually different from scanning. When you're scanning, you're purely doing data collection and then uploading that scan to Niantic, and then we build maps and meshes out of your scans. When you're testing VPS, you're actually testing the exact same system that your players will be using to engage in AR experiences that you build at those VPS activated locations. So in this short video, this is another way spot in my neighborhood. I've just gone to this location called Rose Court, and this location is activated on VPS. I'm pointing my camera at it, and then pretty quickly it is successfully localizing. And it says localization detected. That means that we were able to successfully localize there. So what's happening here is it's sending a single frame from your camera and then seeing if it can localize against that space based on the map that we have built at that space. So that is another one of the really critical use cases of Wayfarer app, is to, once a location is activated, make sure that you can actually localize there, because that's really good indication that if you build an AR experience there, your users are going to be able to interact with it effectively. So next, I want to get to some questions, but first I want to talk about a few things that are coming up next. If you've been following along with what I've been discussing in terms of this workflow from, we've got discovering waste spots, nominating waste spots, submitting scans of those waste spots, and then testing localization. So there's a really critical step that happens between submitting scans at a location and being able to test localization there, which is we actually have to, once we have enough data, we have to activate that location on VPS. When you submit a private scan, since it's just one scan, we automatically activate it, and then that one scan becomes a private location that you can test against. It's a lot more complicated when we're building experiences at public waste spots, because at waste spots, we are connecting together a whole bunch of different scans, usually many dozen different scans from a whole bunch of different people with different devices at different times on different days. And we actually fuse all that together to make the most robust possible map. Which means it's going to be a lot more complicated than just saying, oh, one scan, one location, done. We're actually going to take a whole bunch of different scans at one location and fuse them all together into a single map. And for that reason, until very recently, we have been making the decision on our side of when we think a location has enough scans for us to activate it on VPS. And we had a pretty high bar for that. But what we have realized in the time hence is that developers don't want to have to wait for Niantic to get back to them about whether a location is ready or not. So we are actually going to directly give developers the ability to make an assessment. I think I've uploaded enough data here. I need to start testing, and I can always add more scans later. So we are adding something called the activate button, which means when you select a waste spot that is not yet activated, as long as it has enough scans, you will be able to directly press that button and you will kick off a mapping job that happens on our side that will activate that location on VPS. So if I jump back a couple slides to this submit scans example, when I open this up, this new waste spot that I added in my neighborhood, when I first press on this, it doesn't have any scans. It says 0 out of 10. So what I did is like, okay, obviously I need to start scanning it. So I collect my first scan. And then after I upload that, we'll be at 1 out of 10. What that means is that when we get to the point where it does have enough scans, so jump back to discover waste spots. In this example, I think I showed one that had 28. So if this location were not VPS activated, if it were 28 out of 10 and it were not VPS activated, we are adding in a button that will allow you as a developer to say like, hey, I would like this location to be activated on VPS so I can start building here. And then that will kick off an automated job that will then activate that location on VPS. We're still working on making that process as fast as possible. But in general, that should be able to happen within like a day or two. Let me think. Yeah, we'll be updating our documentation to explain like what the SLA and what the general expectation should be here. But the really exciting thing about this is it allows you as a developer to start adding new locations, scanning them and activating them without needing to hear back from Niantic in between, which we're hoping will rapidly speed up your iteration cycle. So that's one really important feature that's coming. That's actually launching. We're planning to have that out this month. So very soon there will be an activate button that you can press that as soon as something is fully scanned, you can activate it on VPS. One other exciting thing that is coming is an enhanced content authoring experience. So one thing that we are doing is the same that same workflow where you can scan a location, where you can scan a private location and like download the mesh. We're going to make it much easier to author content at that location, both for private scans and public scans. So one of my colleagues here at Niantic is actually working on what we're calling content authoring or remote content authoring. That's going to make it much easier to do development at private locations as well as VPS activated public way spots. So that's coming too. There'll probably be another session about that, or at the very least, some updated documentation and a beta. If you're not already hearing about those things, that should be coming soon. And then one last thing that I'm very excited about that my colleague Sky and I are going to be working on is a dedicated consumer app. So going all the way back to what is Wayfarer, right now, we launched the Wayfarer app really quickly earlier this year and initially released that to developers with a sort of a stripped down set of use cases specifically focused on allowing developers to submit scans and do their test cycles for VPS. As I mentioned earlier, like one of the most important aspects of the Niantic map is that it is a shared map that is contributed to and benefits the entire Niantic game community of millions and millions of players. And then we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of those players that also actively contribute to that map. And they contribute locations, they review locations that are submitted, they contribute scans. In the future, there's all sorts of other contributions that they will be able to make. And currently, as I mentioned, those players are using sort of a disparate set of tools that exist within the Niantic games, as well as on a Wayfarer website. So what we're doing is we're actually taking the application that we have built for you, our developers, and we are expanding that application to harden it and make it so that our players can also contribute data into this shared map that we are building. And one of the reasons I am most excited about this is because that will allow even locations that you as a developer submit. That will mean that anyone who is interested in that location will be able to see it and also contribute more information to that location. So it's richer, more robust, and will also be able to be a more effective piece of the Niantic map that we're building for everyone to share. So that's one other really exciting thing that we're going to be launching next year, is basically taking a lot of what we have built for you this year and expanding that out to a much larger audience, which will allow us to scale up the map a lot faster. So that's the last piece there in terms of exciting things that are coming. There's certainly a lot of other things. These are just like three that I'm picking that I think are pretty critical and also coming up pretty soon. So with that, I want to quickly just remind folks about some of the resources that we have. We have our developer documentation page on lightship.dev that explains a lot of these concepts in detail. There's also going to be some updates coming soon that'll explain, for example, how to use the new activate button as soon as that launches. That, again, should be a little bit later this month. And then, of course, you can also join and chat in the Lightship Discord. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Chanel, who's going to help facilitate some of the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Tori. That was a really exciting session. I know that I found it really informative, especially the what's coming section. A lot of the people in the chat were really excited about the activation button. So we have lots of questions in Slido already. If you guys haven't had a chance to enter your question in Slido, please do so. That's our best way to make sure that we get your questions answered. And also there's the upvote feature in Slido. If you see a question that you really want us to focus on, please upvote it. That'll help us prioritize questions. But yeah, thank you guys for putting in your questions right now. And the first question I have for us is, how soon do you expect the ability to upload later on Wayspot creation?
Upload later on Wayspot creation. So is this, I think.
If that was your question, feel free to unmute yourself and elaborate as well. That'd be very helpful.
Yeah, sure. That'd be really helpful.
Anyone, was that your question?
Can you repeat again the question, please?
Yeah, how soon do you expect the ability to upload later on Wayspot creation? I think that was David Sinclair, if you're still here, David.
So I if I'm understanding the question, I think it is about like, is it possible, or like, when can I nominate a waste spot and then upload the images and the waste spot nomination later? I think I actually ran into a bug yesterday when I was creating these videos where I didn't have enough. I did not have enough data connection to upload at the location, so I had to walk back to my apartment to get on Wi-Fi and then upload it, and then it worked. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks, David. I see your response there. So that is something that we're working on addressing. It just happened to me yesterday, and I was surprised that it didn't work right away. So that is something we're working on. I can't give you a definite delivery date, but I think it's a pretty straightforward thing for us to solve.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is there a way to have my own database of private waste spots or private scans so these locations are not visible to other players or developers?
Good question. So as I was mentioning earlier, it is very resource intensive and expensive for us to turn scans into maps that can be used. And because we want to build, at least initially, a map that everyone can use, so this can be a shared resource. We are not dedicating resources right now to allowing developers to build their own maps that only they can use. I sort of think about this as like what we're doing is really building a set of it's really infrastructure that everyone can use. So for the same reason that you wouldn't want to install a 5G network that only works with one website, like we want to build a map of the world that can be used for any application. So as a developer, if you are building an experience and you're prototyping at private locations, that's fine, and we're going to continue to enable you to do that. But what we do not want to do is we don't want every developer to build their own private map that only they can use, because it's well, for a lot of reasons. One, just because it's extremely expensive and we wouldn't be able to support that economically. And then secondly, it kind of runs counter to our mission of having a shared experience. And if we build one map and do a good job and allow everyone to participate in that map, that's going to allow us to have all developers benefit from the platform in the same way, which is much more conducive to our mission.
Yeah, thanks, Tori. I agree that really aligns with our mission of explore the world together. Next question is, what should I do if there are no waste spots in my country, but I want to publish VPS in a public waste spot? Should I contact the local Wayfarer community?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Chanel?
Yeah. What should I do if there are no waste spots in my country, but I want to publish VPS in a waste spot?
So if there are no waste spots in your entire country, I know there are some countries that we do not operate in. If that is the case, then there's not much that I can do. But as long as you are in a country that Niantic operates in, I think there's like 175 of them. There are definitely some countries we can operate in, but as long as you are a country in which we operate, you can directly add waste spots with the Wayfarer app now as a developer and get those added pretty quickly. Perhaps we could follow up separately. If you have a question about your specific country, you don't need to tell me what country you're in front of like the whole group, but yeah, we should be able to solve that problem unless it's a country that we're not allowed to operate in.
Yeah, thanks, Tori. What are the implications of working on Lightship with adding provisional waste spots in a network that already that already lives in games? Is there a concern with duplicates?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so creating a provisional waste spot, the way that works with our backend infrastructure is when you open up the Wayfarer app and go to a location, you'll be able to see when you are nominating a new waste spot if there is an existing waste spot there. And as part of the review process, the folks that are reviewing your submission are also checking to make sure that it is not a duplicate of an existing waste spot. when you create the actual data artifact and that gets uploaded to our server, it shows up as a waste spot with a tag that says, is this a provisional waste spot or not? The reason that we create the notion of a provisional waste spot is to allow you as a developer to start scanning right away without having to wait, days, weeks, months for the community to vote on it. And then our ops team, if you're a developer, actually directly checks to make sure that that is available so that you can start, immediately start scanning and begin your development process. The duplication concern should be addressed because we actually have humans in the loop, as well as some other checks to make sure that you're not creating a waste spot on top of an existing waste spot. But when you go through the nomination process, you'll also be able to see like what the other nearby waste spots are.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. The next question is there a way to get weather data from a waste spot? Like the scan has been done at 5 p.m. and the weather type is sunny or cloudy.
That is a really interesting feature. We do not have that feature available yet. I think there's a couple different ways we could try to figure that out. We do, like in our games, for example, we do surface information about weather conditions for folks that have played like Pokemon Go or Pikmin Bloom. You might notice that sometimes you get information about the weather. Right now, that information is not collected every time you submit a scan, though.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. And then another question is, will we be able to submit contributing scans from my own apps? I want to make scanning VPS points part of a game mechanic to get them more online.
Sorry, could you reread that, Chanel? I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah. Will we be able to submit contributing scans from my own apps? I want to make scanning VPS points part of a game mechanic.
Oh, yes, you will. Great. That's another exciting thing that's coming soon. I should have added that. So obviously with the Wayfarer app, you can add scans at any at any waste spot. We are also taking the scanning function and turning it into a module that developers will be able to insert into their own applications. So if you wanted to build your own app and you wanted your players to be able to contribute more scans to locations that matter for your games, you will soon be able to do that as well. We actually have that feature in private beta right now, and that'll be launching into public beta probably in Q1.
Awesome. That's really exciting. Thank you. Another question is, can we co-produce a scan? I want another person to help me with the scan. Is this possible?
Co-produce a scan?
I think what they mean is just multiple people contribute to scanning a location.
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, that is definitely ideal. So as soon as you create a provisional waste spot, that provisional waste spot will actually show up for anyone that opens the app. So it's not limited to you, and you definitely shouldn't assume that, oh, I have to do all the scanning myself. If you're building your app with anyone else, and especially once we expand the user base of the Wayfarer app, anyone will be able to see that location and contribute scans to it. So that will be definitely the best path forward.
Awesome, thank you. And I think this another question is just clarifying the scanning process. Jamie had a question. When we scan, it requires 20 seconds, but it is actually 1 minute. After it continues up 5 times for the scans. And if we scan 5 times, is that 5 scans once, or is it 1 session? You can clarify, Jamie, if you want.
Yeah. So when I do scans, it requires 20 seconds, but you can do up to 1 minute if you let it just run, which is better. But then it has a message that says resume or stop. So if you don't push resume, you can scan up to 5 times. So does that actually count as 5 scans for that location, or is it 1 scan since you're actually just scanning once 5 times?
So the way we manage this today, 1 scan is defined as all of the frames that you've recorded connected together with a single AR session, which means like each frame is connected to the next frame with pose information. And as long as it's 1 continuous scan, then we count that as 1 scan. So whether your scan is 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute, that still counts as one scan. The maximum length for one scan is 60 seconds. And the reason for that is the way that our map building pipeline works. 60 seconds is about the largest chunk of data that we can work with. Like a 60-second scan, I think, is ballpark 200 megabytes. And since we have like many petabytes of data that go through our pipeline, we've optimized it to work with chunks of visual and spatial data that are up to about that size. So if you want to, if you are submitting scans, 20 seconds is the minimum, 60 seconds is the maximum for what one scan can be. And in general, again, we benefit from more variance. So if I had to choose between would I rather have 3 20-second scans at one location or one 60-second scan at a location, I would much rather have 3 20-second scans, because there is sort of an implicitly there's going to be more variance in 3 separate scans, even if they're from the same person, than from one 60-second scan.
To clarify a little bit more, so like if I scan one minute is a scan, but like if I don't press stop, it says like resume or stop scanning after I do my first scan. If I don't press stop, it does it for 5 times. So that's 5 times. That's 5 scans, correct?
So that's 5 total minutes.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
in the
that would be
Wayfarer app,
so that would be 5 scans.
So yeah, I'm trying to get it for VPS activation. So that one session, I could do 5 scans and submit those. Okay.
You could, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying, Jamie. That was really helpful. Another question that we have, Tori, is many objects are too large to scan, like a water tower. What should we do with those, or is there some kind of best practice around that?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so the way VPS works today, the largest size of localizable area that we can accommodate is roughly 10 by 10 by 10 meters. So think of like a medium-sized studio apartment in terms of the localizable area. Once you've localized there, you can still render things that are outside of that area as long as you've localized within that localizable area. There's definitely a lot of waste spots that exist, again, because there's like, 18 million of them. There are a lot of waste spots that exist that are good for some types of AR gameplay, but might not be good for VPS for a number of different reasons. So the example of like a water tower, since a lot of what you see when you see a water tower is like quite far away and can't be reached, you wouldn't be able to localize to the top of the water tower. But if you do a good job of scanning and capturing what the base of the water tower looks like, you would still be able to localize at that location. But in general, the most important things for VPS to work well at a location is for that location to be distinct and consistent in its appearance. So distinct means that that location should be clear. Like if you showed someone a snapshot of that and they saw like, oh yeah, that's what that is. An example of something that's not distinct is if you were like in the middle of a big field of corn or something like that, then it's just corn everywhere. And if you show that picture to someone, they're not going to be able to figure out like what part of the cornfield was I standing in. So the distinct piece, even though the water tower is like pretty high up, the base of the water tower is pretty distinct. In terms of the consistent piece, that matters because if a location looks different every day, then it's going to be really difficult for you to localize there. So for example, the beach is not a very good place to try to localize because the tide goes in and out and the sand even moves around. And like every time someone takes a step in the sand, it leaves a mark in the sand. So since the beach looks different all the time, that is a location that's not very consistent in appearance. So the locations that work best are distinct and consistent in appearance. And then also, if you look at our existing waste spots, they are typically also locations that are pretty self-contained. So like even if someone is nominated like a park, usually it is specifically like a sign at the park or a statue at the park, as opposed to the entire park.
Awesome. That was a really helpful answer, Tori. And I know that we only have a few more minutes left, so let's see if we get maybe 2 more questions in, if not one longer question. Can we get a provisional Wayspot VPS activated? And if so, what's the process?
Yes, yeah. So with the new functionality that we've added, you can actually request a provisional Wayspot to be activated, even if it hasn't been approved by the ops team at Niantic yet. So as soon as you have nominated the Wayspot and we've collected at least 10 scans with at least 5 hours elapsed between the oldest scan and the newest scan at that location, the activate button will appear in the Wayfarer app and you'll be able to request activation of that location. And again, that improvement will be shipping this month.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you have a date on that?
I can't give you a specific day yet, but I'm expecting it to be before Christmas.
Awesome. Great Christmas present for Niantic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess our last question could be, what happens when a person presses the report a Wayspot button?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so this is something that doesn't just apply to developers. This also applies to anyone in the Wayfarer community. When you press report Wayspot, typically you're saying that either this location is not safe or this location is on my private property and I don't think it is appropriate for it to be in a Niantic game. So when you report a location, the Niantic ops team actually reviews it to see if that is a valid complaint. So when people report a location, they usually provide some supporting documentation of like why they think this location is unsafe. And then we make an assessment of whether or not that claim is valid. And then we address it one way or the other.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tori. We have lots of questions still in Slido. I'll share the admin link with you, Tori, and I hope that we can kind of answer those questions in the back end and that you guys can revisit the answers later on. But thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you, Tori, for this awesome presentation and Q&A session. And we'll stay in line for a little bit while you guys hop off. Thank you. See you guys next time.